Hello there. If you're listening to this, chances are you've sighed at some English grammar rule before. You know, sometimes just three tiny words, in, on, it, can make us feel completely lost. They look simple enough. Everyone thinks they understand them, until they actually have to speak. I've seen so many learners, even those who've lived abroad for years, pause for a second. Thinking, wait, should I say in Monday or on Monday? Sounds familiar, doesn't it? I still remember, a few years ago on my podcast, a listener sent me this question. Tom, why is English so complicated? Why do we say in 2020 but on Monday and at 6 o'clock? Why can't there just be one simple rule for everything? I smiled and told him, because language isn't math, it's music. Every word in English has its own rhythm, its own feeling, its own distance. It doesn't just tell you where or when something happens, it tells you how close you are to that moment. Or that place. So imagine this with me for a second. A pyramid. At the bottom, wide, open, full of space, that's in. In the middle, narrower, that's on. And at the top, small, sharp, precise, that's at. In is like an umbrella that covers a large space or a long period of time. When we say in 2020, we're talking about a year, a whole chapter of life. Not a single date. In the morning, in summer, in London. They all carry the feeling of being inside something bigger than ourselves. Then comes on, a little more specific. When we say on Monday, on the table, on the wall, we mean something that sits on a surface, it touches, it connects, but it doesn't go inside. I like to think of on as a point of contact. It's where the outside world begins to touch us. And then there's it, the tip of the pyramid, where everything becomes clear and exact. At 6 o'clock. At the door. At the bus stop. It's the moment, the coordinate, the dot where you can point and say, there, that's the spot. But here's the interesting part. Language isn't perfect. It mirrors human feelings, not formulas. That's why there are exceptions, like we say in the morning. In the afternoon, but at night. Why? Because, deep down, we don't feel the night as a long stretch. We feel it as a moment, still, quiet, contained. So we say at night, as if we're standing at a pause in time. Or take at school and in school. Two little phrases that sound almost the same, yet mean something subtly different. When we say at school, we're talking about the location, being there physically, maybe studying, maybe working, maybe just visiting. But in school? That's about identity. You're a student. You belong to that world. You're growing inside it. One tiny preposition, and the meaning completely changes. That's what makes English beautiful. It's not about being right or wrong, it's about expressing a feeling. I often tell my students, when you understand the feeling of a word, you don't need to memorize the rule anymore. Because language doesn't live in your head, it lives in your ears. In your heart. In the way you experience life. Think about this. When you say in love, you're inside an emotion. When you say on fire, you're riding an energy, a burst of passion. And when you say at peace, you're exactly at the point of calm. Just three words, but an entire journey from broad to specific. From space to moment, from distance to touch. So next time you learn English, don't just memorize vocabulary, learn the rhythm of the words. The next time you hear someone say on Monday, imagine them standing on the surface of a day, like standing on a skateboard of time. When you hear at midnight, imagine a small dot on the timeline, where one day ends and another begins. And when you say in summer, feel yourself surrounded by warmth, by sunlight, a space without borders. Language is music, and music only makes sense when you pause long enough to listen. So don't learn in, on, at as three separate rules. Live with them as three layers of perception. At the bottom, we understand vastness. In the middle, we find connection. At the top, we touch precision. Language, just like life, is a journey, from the unclear to the defined, from wide open spaces to the single point where we finally meet ourselves. Soft music fades out, voice slows. Thank you for being here, for learning, and for reflecting with me. Sometimes, Understanding one small thing can change the way we see the whole world. Now, I want you to try something with me. If you're listening right now, close your eyes for a moment. Take a deep breath. And imagine you're living an ordinary day, waking up in the morning, going to work, talking to people, coming home, resting. Now, try to hear English in those tiny moments. In the morning, you check your phone, see a meeting scheduled on Monday. You text your friend, let's meet at 7 o'clock. See? We're already using in, on, at every single day, in every movement of time. Language doesn't live in textbooks, it lives in the rhythm of your own life. I remember once teaching a group of adult learners, people who were terrified of English grammar. They told me, "Teacher, I can never remember when to use in or on." And I didn't make them memorize the rules. Instead, I asked them to imagine. In is when you're inside something big. On is when you touch something. At is when you arrive at one exact point. We sat there, eyes closed, picturing it together. When you're in the park, you're surrounded by nature. When you're on the bench, your hands touch the wooden surface. When you're at the gate, you're right there, the point between inside and outside. It wasn't grammar anymore, it was experience. And suddenly, they spoke more naturally than ever before. Because once you feel a word, you no longer have to remember it. You know, there's a fascinating study from Cambridge University. Researchers found that when learners connect real emotions to new vocabulary, their brain stores it in the same region that holds long-term personal memories. In other words, if you learn in, on, at like numbers, you'll forget them. But if you learn them through images, emotions, and stories, you'll remember them forever. That's why I always tell my students, learn English slowly. Don't rush. Let the language pass through your heart before it reaches your head. Try this tomorrow, when you write in your journal or take notes on your phone. Write slowly, in English. I woke up in the morning. I walked on the street. I arrived at work. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be true. And that truth, that authenticity, will teach you more than any grammar book ever could. If you listen to podcasts, try shadowing. Repeat what you hear. Don't think about grammar, just focus on rhythm. Let your ears listen, your mouth speak, your body move with the sound. That's how language becomes part of you. Have you ever noticed that people who speak English fluently aren't necessarily grammar experts, they're feelers of language? They can sense when to say in love, on purpose, or at home. They don't think, they feel. Language, after all, isn't a tool for getting high scores, it's a bridge between people. When you use the right preposition, you're not just being correct, you're being human. You're saying something that feels right. Think about it. When you say, I'm at the station, it's not just information. It's presence. It's you saying, I'm here, right now. And maybe, that's what life is really about. Knowing where you are. Knowing when to pause. Knowing when you're truly in the moment. Learning in, on, at isn't only about grammar, it's about awareness. The vastness of in. The connection of on. The precision of at. When you say at peace, you're not just calm, you're exactly where you're meant to be. Thank you for listening, for allowing yourself to slow down, to feel language in a different way. It may be just 3 little words, but if you truly understand them, they can change how you see the world. Because language isn't only for speaking, it's for understanding yourself, understanding others, and realizing that everything in life has its own place, its own rhythm, and its own preposition. See you in the next episode of this podcast. We'll keep learning, but more importantly, we'll keep listening. You know, sometimes, what makes us love a language isn't how beautiful it sounds, but how real it feels. Language is the way we record every breath of life. When you say in, you're opening yourself to the world, you're inside space, inside time, inside emotion. When you say on, you're stepping onto the surface of an experience, gently touching the edge between yourself and something else. And when you say at, you're standing at the exact point, the place you choose to pause or begin. Everything in life, Really, works just like those three prepositions. We begin in a dream, in a plan, in a relationship. Then we move on, we walk, we experience, we stumble. And finally, we arrive at a moment, a place, a realization where we quietly say, yes, I'm here. Language teaches us that, even when we don't notice. When we say in love or in pain, it's our way of admitting that emotions aren't things we own, they're spaces we live inside. When we say on stage or on duty, it's how we step out of comfort, how we face the world. And when we say at home or at peace, that's when we find where we truly belong. I think maybe that's why learning English, when done the right way, can be healing. Because the more we learn, the more we understand ourselves. When you choose the right word, you're not just being grammatically correct, you're being emotionally honest. I once had an older student, she was over 50, who came to my class just to stop being afraid of English. One day, during a writing exercise, she wrote a simple sentence. I'm at peace with my past. Just 6 words. But when she read it out loud, the whole room fell silent. Because it wasn't English anymore, it was truth. It was release. It was healing. That's the power of language. It helps us say the things we never knew how to name. And I believe, you can find that same power in your own journey of learning. Let me ask you something. Where are you in your life right now? What path are you on? And at what point are you at with yourself? When you stop for a moment to ask these questions, you're not just learning a language, you're learning how to listen to your life. I know sometimes you get frustrated. English feels hard, too many rules, strange pronunciations, endless exceptions. But really, no one learns a language through memory alone. People learn through their hearts, through connection, through belonging, through the feeling of being understood. And if you're listening to me right now, maybe you're already on that path. A path back to language, not to speak perfectly, but to speak honestly. Give yourself permission to slow down. Be patient with every word, every sentence, every mistake. Because each mistake is proof that you're moving forward. Closer to confidence. Closer to the version of you that exists in another language. I want you to remember this. Every time you say one sentence in English, even the simplest one, you're not just speaking to someone else. You're speaking to the version of you from yesterday, and telling them, I've come further than before. And that's what makes learning English beautiful. Not because we speak perfectly, but because we dare to speak. Not because we know every rule, but because we choose to connect. And every time you use in, on, or at correctly, it's more than a small victory. It's a step deeper into the world of language. And a step closer to yourself. Have you ever noticed? We often learn a language to speak, but rarely to listen. To listen to what the language is telling us. And what it's trying to say for us. English, or any language really, isn't just a tool. It's a mirror. Every word you say, every sentence you write, reflects a small part of who you are. I've met so many people who speak English fluently, perfectly even. But when they talk, I can't really hear them. I hear structure, I hear correctness. But their feelings, their truth, are lost somewhere between the lines. And then there are others who still hesitate, who mispronounce words, who make mistakes. Yet every sentence they speak has soul. There's breath in their words. They don't speak to impress. They speak to connect. And language, like magic, opens a door between them and the world. You see, in life, speaking right isn't always as important as speaking true. It's the same with prepositions, in, on, at. If you only memorize rules, you'll forget them. But if you understand how each word feels, you'll speak naturally, effortlessly, like breathing. I remember a colleague of mine, a linguist from the US. He once told me, language isn't something we own, it's a place we live. And he was right. Every language is a kind of home. A space we can live in, feel in, and rediscover ourselves through. Learning a new language isn't about building another wall in your mind. It's about opening another door in your heart. When you say in the world, you're surrounded by the unknown. When you say on the way, you're walking forward, carrying belief and direction. When you say at the end, you're standing at a closing point. But also, maybe, at the beginning of something new. So every time you learn a new word, don't just memorize it. Imagine it. Imagine the space, the sound, the feeling of that word. Imagine yourself inside it. For example, instead of remembering this mechanically, in is for large spaces, on is for surfaces, at is for exact points. Try closing your eyes. Picture yourself in the park, hearing the soft rustle of leaves around you. Then sitting on the bench, feeling the cool wood beneath your hands. And stopping at the gate, breathing in, ready to step into the world beyond. When you learn through emotion, you turn language into memory. And memories, you know this, never fade. I know that sometimes, the journey of learning English feels lonely. No one really sees how hard you're trying. No one knows how many times you've practiced alone. Talked to yourself in the mirror. Or corrected one tiny mistake until you were exhausted. But please remember this. Every time you don't give up, you've already won a little victory. And with every small step, the language is blooming inside you. Like a quiet seed growing from patience and faith. So don't compare your journey with anyone else's. Language has no finish line. Only moments when you realize how far you've come. Let learning be more than a task. Let it be a small joy. Like enjoying a song, a cup of tea, or a slow, unhurried afternoon. Let every English word you learn become a piece of memory, a part of your inner world. Because sometimes, in the simplest words, in, on, at, we find the deepest lessons. How to be present, how to connect, and how to touch what truly matters. Learning English isn't really about speaking better. It's about understanding deeper. About language. About people. And about yourself. If you're still here, listening until this very moment, thank you. Truly. Because in a world that rushes by so fast, the fact that you've taken a few quiet minutes to listen, to feel, to think, that already means something. I don't know where you are right now as you hear these words. Maybe you're on a bus, in a quiet coffee shop, or just sitting alone in your room. But I believe, wherever you are, you're learning how to listen. Not just to language, but to life itself. English, after all, isn't only words and rules. It's a bridge between you and the world out there. But sometimes, it's also a bridge that leads back inside. A way to understand yourself. To be kinder to yourself. To believe that you are patient enough, persistent enough, and gentle enough to grow. When I was younger, I used to think learning a language was about going out, conquering new things. But the older I got, the more I realized, learning a new language is about coming home. To listen to the parts of yourself that never had a voice before. So if you take just one thing from today, let it be this. Learn to slow down, to feel more deeply, and to trust your own journey a little more. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to sound imperfect. Language doesn't punish you. It simply asks, do you love me enough to stay? And maybe one day, on an ordinary day, you'll say a sentence in English. So natural, so effortless. And you'll realize, you're not afraid anymore. You're no longer thinking about right or wrong. You're simply connecting. With the language. With another person. With the world. If you see yourself in these words, leave me a small comment below. Tell me your story. Your learning journey. Your moments of doubt. Your small victories when you smiled because you finally dared to begin again. And if you'd like to keep walking this path with me, stay. Subscribe. Not for the algorithm, but so we can meet again. Among stories of language, of people, and of all the quiet, beautiful things that make life feel whole. Thank you for listening, for your patience, and for believing in the power of simple things. See you again, some evening soon, perhaps, when we sit down together once more, with a cup of tea and learn to speak gently, honestly, and from the heart.